We are the paradoxical ape. Bipedal, naked, large-brained, long the master of fire, tools, and language, but still trying to understand ourselves. Aware that death is inevitable, yet filled with optimism. We grow up slowly. We hand down knowledge. We empathize and deceive. We shape the future from our shared understanding of the past. CARTA brings together experts from diverse disciplines to exchange insights on who we are and how we got here. An exploration made possible by the generosity of humans like you.
Good afternoon. I would like to start with acknowledgements just in case I run out of time and Bahani kicks me out. I'm happy to be here, and thanks to CARTA Foundation for inviting me, and thank you to the organizers, Bahani Asfa and Lynn Wadley, and also to Linda. I think we have been communicating a lot with Linda, and also to the general staff of CARTA for making this trip and this symposium a success. I'm saying a success because I think it will be a success until the end. So I've been invited to give a talk on Australopithecus in East and South Africa. It's quite an enormous task, and I think I'll try to do justice because it's an enormous field of research that has gone on to make this research come to fruition. So let's get the facts. For the first 5 million years of our evolution since our common ancestors with the closest cousins, the chimpanzees, at 7 million years, those first 5 million years of our evolution are confined in Africa. So if we are understanding the story of humankind, the story of us, the very first 5 million years, you don't find fossils anywhere except in Africa. And most of those fossils that span during that time, they are within the group called Australopithecus, the genus called Australopithecus. There are others which I'll talk about later, but since this is the focus of the topic, I'll confine myself mostly to that group or genus, the Australopithecus. So to talk about the Australopithecus is, if you're talking about the genus, it's almost the same as if you're talking about human evolution. You cannot talk about human evolution without talking about Charles Darwin. If you're talking about Australopithecus, you cannot talk Australopithecus without talking about Lemodat. This is the person who coined the term Australopithecus in 1925 after getting a skull of what is commonly known as Taung child in a site in South Africa called Taung. This was in 1924, but the publication to name this species was in 1925. Raymond Dutt recognized various characteristics of the Taung child, some of which were human-like and others that were ape-like. And as highlighted in the slide, you can see the Taung child skull possessed a forward-placing foramen magnum, indicating that it was walking bipedally, and we know as part of the primate family, we are the only ones who walk bipedally. So he recognized that this has to be in line with the humans. He also recognized that the ape had a human-like forehead. It had no marked diastema, which is the space between the canine and the incisors. And it also had a reduced brow ridge. That's this part of your face. Those features tied it or brought it closely in line with what we see in humans. However, the skull itself had a very small brain, which is ape-like. It had a jaw which was jutting forwards, which was also ape-like, and it had no chin. So he called these Australopithecus africanus, the southern ape man from Africa, and described it as an extinct race of apes intermediate between living anthropoids and man. However, this didn't go down well within the scientific community. He was criticized, first for mixing Greek and Latin in coming up with the naming of the species. Also, at the same time, we had the pure dun hoax, which had been engineered since 1912, and it indicated that the humans, or the ancestors of humans, we should be expecting a big brain and an ape-like jaw, and the rest of the body was supposed to be catching up in evolutionary terms. And also it didn't help that during that time, Homo neanderthalensis had been discovered in Germany in 1856. Homo erectus had been discovered in Java in 1891, and Homo heidelbergensis had also been discovered in 1907. So there were already specimens that were already human-like that were competing with the theory that Raymond Dutt had indicated that Australopithecus africanus was ancestral to the humans. And also because of the small brain, it was believed that the Australopithecus, or the ancestors to humans, should have a big brain, and so Australopithecus africanus was contrary to what the scientific community believed at the time. But science has proved that that was right, and we now believe there is a general consensus that Australopithecus occupy a morphological space intermediate between early members of genus Homo and the living African apes. Sometimes it's merged Adipithecus, which is there, and Kenyanthropus here, early members of Homo, Paranthropus, which we have Paranthropa ethiopicus in East Africa, Paranthropus boisei also in East Africa, and Paranthropus robustus in South Africa. They merge these into the genus Australopithecus, but this becomes too restrictive because there are clear anatomical differences between the four groups, and these presentations does excludes members that are at any time referred to as Adipithecus, Paranthropus, Kenyanthropus, and Homo, and restricts the discussion on only members that have been referred as Australopithecus and in East Africa and South Africa. In East Africa, we have a number of species that have been identified, and these are the ones that have general consensus that they are within the genus Australopithecus. We have 4 species. We have the latest that have been discovered in Ethiopia. This is Australopithecus Lemeda. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Bahan can correct me. This Australopithecus anamensis, discovered in Kenya. Australopithecus afarensis, discovered in Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. Australopithecus garai, discovered in Ethiopia. And the vertical lines indicate a species that have been found in more than one site. If it's just a dot, like in Garai, it indicates it has just been found in just a single site. And the horizontal line indicates the span. If it dates, there are dates that extend from, let's say, for example, for an amensis 4.2 to 3.9 million years. But if it's just a single dot, that indicates that specimen has just one single date associated with it. In South Africa, we have Australopithecus prometheus that was named in 1948. Then it was controversial whether that was the specimens represented a new species, and it was dropped off. But last year, there were discoveries that named Australopithecus, revived the name. It's still controversial whether it's scientific to revive a name or whether the name should have fallen out of use. And the dates are still also controversial. We have dates that earliest at 3.67 million years, and some who suggest that the species in fact dates to less than 2.2 million years. So that's why we have that dotted line. In South Africa, we also have Australopithecus sediba at 1.97 million years, and Australopithecus africanus at 3 to 2.1 million years. While each of the species has its own peculiar morphological characteristics, time constraints do not permit discussing each species in isolation. Instead, I'll focus on morphological traits that are rather consistent right through that lineage. So what I'll do is I'll go down from the cranium, indicating what's common and how we understand whether that contributed to who we are and what implications it has. When you look at the cranium of Australopithecus, it shares several cranial characters, including a forward-placed foramen magnum, indicating that this genus was bipedal. They had small brain size, small relative cranial height and breadth, prominent glabella, which is this region here, and relatively robust zygomatic bone, and also they had a jutting jaw. Those are just some of the characteristics. They also had U-shaped dental arcade. The chimpanzees have almost a rectangular dental arcade, and the modern humans, we have a parabolic dental formula. When you look at the brain, the general trend in human evolution is an increase in cranial capacity, and this trend becomes marked in the genus Homo. And usually it's often associated with consumption of meat. We know that brain size increased more than threefold from Australopithecus to our genus species. So you can see the Australopithecus here, they had very small brain size, and when you come to us, it's almost about 3 times what you see in the Australopithecines. One critical question in human evolution is the timing and mode of early hominid brain evolution. As late as 2010, it was generally assumed that brain size increment preceded brain reorganization. From 3.6 million years, that's when we have the Australopithecus prometheus, to 2 million years, which is represented by Australopithecus sediba. Research indicates that Australopithecus cortical folding patterns in the brain were essentially chimpanzee-like. Brain volumes are also at least at the upper end of chimpanzee valuation. However, Australopithecus sediba, which is represented here, and also this is sediba, which was discovered in 2008. Australopithecus sediba display human-like local protrusion in the inferior frontal area, which is that region that's highlighted here. And which the researchers led by Chris Carlson, they call this as an implication of early stages of bolstering local neuroconnectivity in Area 45, and which they argue is related to speech. Thus, the current consensus is that there is a gradual neural reorganization of the orbitofrontal region in the transition from Australopithecus to Homo, but not gradual enlargement before transition. So what does an increase in brain size demand? An increase in brain size demands an increase in energy intake and/or a reduction in energy allocation to other energy-demanding functions, for example, by adopting a more efficient bipedal locomotion, having a slower growth and reproduction rate, and having smaller guts. All these factors have been observed or inferred in the evolution from Australopithecus to Homo. If you look at the shoulders and the thorax, Australopithecus genus is characterized by a relatively elevated shoulders and a conical shape in the upper thorax, which is, you can see the shoulders here are elevated. This is Australopithecus sediba, that's modern humans, and that's the chimpanzees. The shoulders are elevated. So Australopithecus have this general shape, which is similar to what we see in the chimpanzees. The high positioned shoulders have been interpreted as indicative of upper limbs that were habitually used in overhead postures in the context of arboreal, locomotion, and positional behaviors. That means they would have, most of the time, been using their arms like this. That's whether they were climbing or using that for movement on the trees. A conical-shaped torso, as you can see on these, which is similar to what you see in the chimpanzees. The humans have a barrel-shaped torso, is effective in evenly distributing stress on the rib cage during arm hanging, but also there is a drawback to that because it makes it difficult to swing arms when walking upright or running. A barrel-shaped thorax, as in modern humans, is well adapted for endurance, walking, and running. This is a depiction of Australopithecus climbing, and you have to agree with me, this has to be a very small tree if they are holding on the branch and also on the ground. If you look at the forelimb, Australopithecus are characterized by long arms with particularly large joint surfaces and a higher branchial index. This is great. The higher branchial index is greater than the modern gorilla, but lower than the chimpanzees, which indicating retention of some degree of arboreal competency. This would also imply an upper limb that was habitually used in overhead postures in the context of arboreal locomotion and positional behaviors. When we look at the hand, Australopithecus possessed long, robust, and curved fingers with strong attachment sites for flexed muscles. The degree of curvature in the shafts of the fingers is correlated with frequency of arboreal behavior. Australopithecus phalanges are intermediary curved between those of modern humans and great apes, suggesting regular substantial climbing and suspension. So the question is, did Australopithecus make stone tools? And what we know is the earliest stone tools are dated to about 3.3 million years. They are called Lomequan, and they predate the early members of the genus Homo by 800,000 years, and the genus Homo is thought to have made the stone tools. So most likely, Australopithecus would have made stone tools. If you look at the spine and the legs, Australopithecus had 5 to 6 broad lumbar vertebrae that articulated to form a human-like lumbar curvature, effective for weight transmission from the upper body to the pelvis, while also permitting the hips and the trunk to swivel forward during walking. Australopiths are characterized by relatively short legs, small femoral heads, small joint surfaces, and the femoral necks are, however, longer and anterior-posteriorly compressed than those of humans and chimpanzees and more highly angled. Shorter legs are less energy efficient in bipedal walking, though they help in lowering the center of gravity, hence increasing stability and balance while walking on an even substrate. Owen Lovejoy has suggested that long femoral necks increase the mechanical advantage of the hip muscle that stabilize the pelvis. When we look at also continuing on the spine and the leg, the distal tibia in Australopithecus is characterized by an anteroposteriorly expanded metaphysis, that's this region here, that has been interpreted as probable early bipedal adaptation that expanded volume of ankle for stress dissipation during walking. The foot of Australopithecus has a large immobilized toe that's in line with other toes, as it's evident in the 3.6 million year old lithoid footprints, and this alignment provides a strong push-off during toe-off. While the pelvis of Australopithecus is human-shaped, it's extraordinarily broad with a wide side-to-side birth canal, small sacral and coaxial joints, long pubic rami. Kevin Hunt has argued that a wider pelvis evolved to allow internal organs to ride lower in the body cavity, thus lowering the center of gravity, hence increasing balance and while bipedal walking. Prior to discovery of Australopithecus sediba, shown here, and this is modern humans, it was assumed that Homo-like architecture of the pelvis was as a result of giving birth to large brain babies. In 2005, Lovejoy argued that the primary differences between the pelvis of Australopithecines and modern humans do not reflect changes in locomotor adaptation, but instead are a complex and elaborate anatomical response to birthing in response to increasing Pleistocene hominid cerebralization. However, the Homo-like pelvis of Australopithecus sediba, coupled with a small adult brain, suggests that birthing of large brain babies was not driving the evolution of the pelvis at 2 million years. Looking at sexual dimorphism, Australopithecus exhibit a greater degree of sexual dimorphism than in modern humans and chimpanzees. They possessed body weights between 25 to 60 kilograms, with males at the high end and females at the low. Females weighed somewhere between 50 and 70% of male body weight. In modern humans, females weigh about 85% of the male body weight. The degree of sexual dimorphism has implications on social organization as well as mating systems. Primate species with higher sexual dimorphism are characterized by intense male-to-male competition. As Larsen has observed, although chimpanzee adult males express aggressive behavior toward one another, they tolerate each other, live in multi-male kin groups, and are collaborative, especially in defending territory. Australopithecus social organization may similarly have been characterized by multi-male cooperating kin groups. So what are the evolutionary relationships? Reconstructing hominid phylogenies is extremely problematic and highly controversial. There is no consensus among paleoanthropologists on how to go about it in the first place. Does one use age of the fossil, geographical locality, morphological traits, and if so, how many of those morphological traits to use? Thus, there is no single universally accepted phylogeny. My preference is not in drawing lines connecting one species to another, but documenting morphological traits and reasoning about the implications of that in time and space. In conclusion, there are three major conclusions that can be drawn from the studies we have about Australopithecines. One, all Australopithecines features considered together denote a small-bodied, small-brained, robust, jawed bipedal apes that retained a substantial arboreal component to their locomotor repertoire. Available morphological evidence demonstrates that the evolutionary transition from small-bodied and perhaps more arboreal-adapted hominins, such as Australopithecus africanus, to a larger-bodied, possibly full-striding terrestrial bipeds, such as Homo erectus, occurred in a mosaic fashion. In terms of stone tool making, we need to investigate the relationship between posture, arm length, and their internal properties, and not just the morphological traits of the hand to characterize a tool maker. And with that, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry, my English is very bad. I can try to speak in English. This is the plan of my presentation. Chadian fossil sites located in the Chad Basin, and it's in two parties. The South Basin includes the present Lake Chad, and North Basin now is desert and subject to significant aeolian deflation. They contain the Aira fossilifera. And sediment deposits in Chad, in Basin Chad, are mainly lacustrine, fluviatile, and aeolian. All the terrestrial mammal remains conserved in the peri-lacustrine unit. And as you know, the most of all human find in African continent. But you know, just 2 points in Central Africa. The most of part is in South Africa or in East Africa. This singular situation led some paleontologists to propose a scenario he called East Side Story. This, according to this hypothesis, about 8 million ago, the Rift Valley Formation caused significant change and separated Africa in two distinct environments. In the west, the dense and humid forest sustain the Great Alps. In the east, a savanna landscape favors Australopithecus emergence. So, the man will be born in East Africa. But Brunet and MPFT test this scenario in 1984 and initiated expedition in the Jurab Desert, northern Chad. The mission paléoanthropologique franco-tchadienne is a scientific collaboration between Poitiers University in France, NDjamena University in CNRD in Chad. The MPFT has listed for sites fossilifera range between 3 and 7 million years. You see the Aira fossilifera, and to go to Jurab, we take car. Geomorphologic of Jurab Desert consists of a large flat to wetly undulated surface, except for few rare features. And Desert Jurab is dotted with recent dunes, and fossilifera seasons are out in the middle of this dune. And the field mostly fossil found in situ, such as fossil cranium of Anthropogeny in situ. Anthropogeny is a cousin of Hippopotamids. And other cars, fossils are partially clearly due to significant aeolian deflation, such cranium with tusks of elephant. We use different methods for excavation and to always to collect fossils. We can research in dispersing rain or in line. Other method is meticulous research. This method always most in case of large specimen identification. And to find small specimen, we proceed to sweat first. And we sorting of residue to look for the smaller specimen. The different method, actually, we are more than 18 fossils are inventoried. It is the most important paleontological collection in Central Africa. Among these associations, there are remains of all hominids. The first is Abel. The name scientific is Australopithecus bar El Ghazali, the first Australopithecus discovered west of the Valley Africa. Chadian hominids display a mosaic of character. We find derived characters such parabolic symphysis, flat chines, asymmetrical canine. And we find also a primitive character such premolar with trois roofs. This character, we name it a new Australopithecus bar El Ghazali. What information can learn about the discovery of Abel? And Australopithecus west of Rift Valley, contemporaries of Lucy, this discovery indicates a busy evolution of the human line. And second, the history of the distribution of the first hominid is incomplete. So you must review the East Side Story scenario. And the research continues. In 2001, we discovered another hominid we call Tumai, dated to 7 million. The Sahelanthropus have a unique combination of primitive and derived characters that differentiate it from both current great apes, gorilla, and chimpanzee, but also from all other genera of fossil hominids, Homo, Australopithecus, Kenyanthropus, Ardipithecus, and Ororin. The new Chadian hominid is characterized by an elongated cerebral capsules, strong and continuous orbital torus. He have also small canine with apical wire. This is the character like human. And tumor skull is deformed during fossilization. We do study for virtual cranial reconstruction of tumor. A study have made reconstruction in 3 dimensions and give the normal shape to the skull of tumor. Chadian discovered suggests, primo, what geographic distribution of old hominid. Second, Tumai with 7 million years is probably very close to the early chimpanzees hominin divergence, at least by 7 million years ago than previously indicated by many molecular studies. We use that thing for the site of Chadian from two approaches, biochronology and radiochronology. Biochronology is based on comparison with other African sites with age are already known using mammal evolution degree, notably Proboscidean and primitive peaks. By biochronology, the evolutive degree of mammal range geological age between 3 and 7 million for Jurassics. These results are confirmed and refined by radiochronology based on the analysis of the radioactive elements. We also do a reconstruction of paleoenvironment of the Jurassics. The Jurassic include aquatic mammals such as crocodiles, fish, and amphibious mammals such as hippopotamus and anthracotherid. These animals attested to the presence of lakes or rivers. We find also galleriforous mammals such as primitive rhinoceros and primitive giraffe. We find also savanna mammals such as equids and primitive gazella. These animals test the presence of woodland environment or open and arid environment. Different methods indicate that ancient Chadian habitat resemble of a mosaic of landscapes ranging from forested areas to vast grasslands and forest gallery. All of these results are valid in scientific review and vulgarized by other journals. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here and present the archaeology of the Konso-Gardula site in this institution. My speech outline will be, first I will start by introducing the Konso-Gardula sites. Then I will go through the 25 years of archaeological research at Konso-Gardula, focusing on the field research and findings, and I will touch upon some of the implications. What you see here is a map of East Africa, and as the Konso-Gardula site is well known for its Acheulean occurrences, meaning stone tools made on large flakes, shaped on large flakes, which appeared as of 1.75 million years ago. My focus will be on sites that are known for their what they have in the representing this technology. Konso-Gardula is one of these sites, together with the Kokosele sites, which is located here in West Turkana. Konso-Gardula is the oldest Acheulean site with hand axes that are dated to be 1.75 million years old. And it's not only these sites, but there are also other sites in East Africa, further north in the lower Awash Valley in Ethiopia, and in Turkana Basin, in the Olduvai Gorge. We have many other sites, but all are not as old as these windows that we have. This is the distribution of the sites within the Konso-Gardula. We discovered this site, the Konso-Gardula, in 1991 in a project that was run by Dr. Burhani, my colleague here. We were working together in those years. We were surveying the whole rift of the Ethiopian part of the Rift Valley, and we discovered several sites. One of these sites happened to be the Konso sites. And this site was a focus of attention for people who were interested in that period, the period between 800,000 and 2 million years old. As you can see here, the oldest sites at Konso-Gardula dated to around 1.75 million years ago are very rare, and it's only one site that we have. And when we come to around 1.6 million years, we have also few sites, but as of 1.45 million years ago, the yellow shows us the distribution of sites. The Acheulean becomes more abundant, and by around 850,000 years ago, we have more Acheulean sites everywhere. It's not only Acheuleans that we have in Konso, but also older one technologies are also represented in sediments which are older than 1.75 million years and all the way to 1.5 million. Here you have a composite stratigraphic section of the Konso site. This section represents 200 meters thickness of sediments, which has about 30 tuff layers, tefacious layers, which were datable, and around 13 of these were dated, radiometrically dated, and they were also correlated with already dated tuff layers on in the Turkana Basin. So we have archaeological occurrences from the lowest here at around 1.992, which are represented by old one technology, meaning simple core flake techniques, but the oldest Acheulean stone tools, represented by hand axes, made on large flakes, appear at KJ6A1, here just above the KYT tuff, which is dated at 1.74, 1,740,000, 1.75 million years. And this age is matched only by the sites that are found in Kokaseli in western Turkana. As we go higher in the stratigraphy, by around 1.63 million years, we have another important Acheulean site, meaning a site with abundant hand axes. But the sites are it is only a single site, but as of around 1.45 million years, we have the number of sites that increases, and the technology also refines through time, as we'll be looking through. This is to show you one of the sites, the older one site, dated at 1.9 million years, at a site called KJ19, and the older one artifacts represented there are, as you see here, are represented by cobbles and flakes. This is another site which is dated, the site that is dated at around 1.75 million years ago, which we call KJ6A1. And what you see here are two tuffs here. You see two tuffs. The archaeological excavation is conducted here, and the upper tuff that you see is dated to 1.74. That is the KYT2 tuff. And this is the excavation, and as you can see up there, we have hand axes made on large flakes discovered in situ through excavations. And the assemblage as a whole, when you look at it, you can see that it is flake-based. You see large flakes. This is the ventral of this hand axis and peaks. And shaping is minimal. And we also find peak forms, peaks, large peaks made on large flakes. So as you can see here, the shape of hand axis is not well attained, and shaping is not that great as other Acheulean hand axes. This is the second oldest site that we have at KGA4A2, dated at 1.6 million years ago. You have here the hand axe staff, and the archaeological layer is just above the hand axe staff and what our excavation was conducted just here, because the overburden on this side was higher. And the artifacts that were, the Acheulean hand axes that were retrieved from the KGA4A2 look like this. They are better shaped than the ones that we saw at KGA6A1. And we see, again, all these hand axes made on large flakes, detached from mega cores. Big boulders were used as a core to detach these large flakes in order to make these hand axes. The other most important sites that we have in the Konso series, we have about 21 sites in Konso, 21 localities. Out of the 21 localities, the KGA10 archaeological locality is one of the most important ones. We have about 11, as you can see, there's 11 locus, archaeological sites that we excavated. And from this site, we also found Homo erectus and Australopithecus boisei, skulls dated to around 1.45 million years ago. And the Konso-Gardula KGA10 locality looks like this. This is the first picture that was taken of this site in 1991. And on the right side, you see how the fossils and the artifacts were eroding out of the sediments when we first arrived there. The KGA10 archaeology shows Acheulean hand axes which are better shaped compared to the former ones. Here you see a crude form of lanceolate kind of crude hand axes, but we see bifacial shaping, contrary to what we saw into the mostly unifacial shaping. And we see the edge regularization also coming into focus. And in general, from the 1.75 million years to 1.74 million years, we see the oldest site here at KGA 6A1, big boulder, which was used as a core, from which large flakes, as you can see, were detached and shaped. And by KGA4 time, at around 1.4, we continue to see large boulders which were used as cores with large giant hammers that were used to detach large flakes. So the 1.75 to 1.4 million years Acheulean in Konso can be summarized as such. When we come to the younger age, this is the KGA12A1 site, and you see multiple layers of tuffs out there, which are calibrated with tuffs that are found in the Kibii formation further south in the Turkana Basin. And from this KGA12A1 site, by around 1.25 million years ago, we have better shaped hand axes. The reduction is well done. The flake scars count augments, age is better regularized, and the planform symmetry is almost attained. And when we compare the KGA12A1 artifacts, hand axes, which we have here down compared to the KGA4A2, the 1.6 million years old hand axis. We see better planform symmetry here. In contrast with this one, the age regularization is better, and the planform symmetry and the scar counts and the invasiveness of the flex scars is very special. And not only that, around the same time, at a site called KGA8A1, between 1.4 and 1.3 million years ago, we see predetermination of the flex that they were going to detach. The hominids knew what kind of flex they were going to detach from the core, from the mega core that they had. So we see here the predetermination. The guys, those hominids had the mental template of the flex that they detached. In the upper section, you see the rows, the arrows, which shows that the preparation of the core before the detachment of the last detachment of the flake at the end. So we see a technique that is commonly known as the Kamboa in that area. Not only that, we also think that from the techniques that are applied on this hand axe, on this bipeds, by 1.3 million years ago, we can permit ourselves to think that perhaps soft hammer techniques, shaping using soft hammer techniques in order to make better regular, better shaped, almost three-dimensionally symmetric stone tools was attained. It was evident by 800,000 years ago at another site that we call KGA18A1. We see better refinement and the choice of raw materials. Rocks is more diverse. They went for more fine-grained rocks, and the 3D symmetry, as you can see it here, is attained. And large, bigger, and well-regular kind of hand axes were also made, and the edge regularization was attained. So the Acheulean industry, the technique of making hand axes, which started by around 1.75 million years ago in Konso. By the way, this is one of the oldest in the world, together with the ones that we have in West Turkana. From the preconception of shape, as you can see here on the left, and intentional shaping, then by the end of the lower Pleistocene, by around 800,000 years, hominids were able to shape better refined hand axes using soft hammer, invasive flex scars were there, and you can see the planform symmetry and the section, which together makes the 3D symmetric hand axes. So, in summary, what we have in Konso from 1.75 million years ago all the way to 850,000 years ago is a continuous progressive change of the technology, the hand axes. It does not mean that there are less better made hand axes, but these are representatives indicative of the trend. And as you can see below, the peak forms continue the same, but the trend with the hand axes is well demonstrated. Konso is not only about lithic materials. It's not about making only stone tools, not only making hand axes from rocks. They were also napping bones from large mammals. At 1.4 million years ago, we have a hand axe made on bones which were modified, maybe for digging, spirally fractured bones to extract marrow, possibly, from the bones. And we also have hominids discovered in this site, here represented by this mandible cranial frax is a Homo erectus, and there is also one postcranial out there. And the best known Konso specimen, Australopithecus boisei, which made it to Nature's cover page, is represented here. So in general, we can see an evolution from the older one to the earliest Acheulean, early Acheulean. Then after 1.45, we have the boisei and the Homo erectus going together, and with more Acheulean sites after the 1.4 million years. And when we compare Konso with what we have in East Turkana, we can say that the earliest Acheulean in Konso began together with the appearance of perhaps the oldest Homo erectus. And as Homo erectus was established, the Acheulean was more developed and took over, and you can even start finding it everywhere in many sites in Middle East, in Nubedia, in several sites in East Africa and elsewhere. So, as in the case of west of Lake Turkana, the earliest Konso-Acheulean occurs at 1.75, and several people have hypothesized why the Acheulean industry happened in the first place, whether it was a phenomenon that appeared with older hominids, or with Homo erectus, as Homo erectus started to include more activities to exploit its landscapes. I would like to thank the Konso Paleoanthropological Research Project, which I co-lead with my colleague, Professor Gensua, and Brownie Asfaw was instrumental, and it was his project which first discovered the site, and he handed it over to me and Gen to work on it, and he continued participating. And Tim White, Gide Walder Gabriel, Shigeru Kato, Shinji Nagaoka, Hido Nakaya, our Japanese colleagues collaborate in this research. And other Ethiopian colleagues also collaborated in this research. And grant was provided by the Japan Ministry of Education and Mitsubishi Foundations, and the Ethiopian Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and ARCSH, and the Konso community and the southern Ethiopian regions government have helped us in all our endeavor to do the field and laboratory research. I thank again CARTA for providing me this opportunity, and I thank you.